let's take a look at our first set of scripture readings that reveals some great information about the rapture. Let's turn to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13 through 18. Now, with all this said, as we turn to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, take a look at Israel in the prophecy chart. The fourth box from the left is the pre-trib rapture box. I've positioned this event after the Ezekiel War and the one world order or one world government. I believe the rapture actually occurs sometime after the Ezekiel War and during the events of the formation of the one world order and the 10 kingdoms. However, because the rapture is imminent, this evaluation could possibly be wrong. It could be incorrect. But hence, this is the reason why I wrote the book, why I believe this is the correct order. I just personally believe we shall see the Ezekiel War before we are raptured. Now let's take a look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13 and following. But we do not want you to be uninformed, brethren, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as do the rest who have no hope. Paul's talking to the Thessalonians, and they had brought up a question to him saying, or they were just concerned about those who have already died in Messiah. The ones who have already passed on and have actually gone to heaven. And so they were concerned about them. And he says, don't worry, you have great hope in Messiah. We're not like the world that has no hope. Verse 14, and here's the reason why. If we believe that Yeshua died and rose again, even so, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep in Yeshua. So in the rapture, this verse right here, verse 14, this is a fascinating phrase that's found in there. It says, God will bring with him those who have died in Yeshua. So in the rapture, there are believers already in heaven coming back with Yeshua. Now I'm going to explain this, what it means, in just a few sentences here, a few verses, I mean. But it's fascinating to see that there's already a group of believers in heaven that are coming back with Yeshua. Verse 15. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord shall not precede those who have fallen asleep. So those who have fallen asleep up until the rapture, those are the ones that are going to be resurrected first. And then those who are alive at the rapture, they'll be resurrected second. Now, first and second really doesn't matter to God because we're talking about really a part of a second in difference in time here. So it's really not this. This is not the issue. But verse 16 now tells us the order of the rapture. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Messiah shall rise first. So here's the order of the rapture. First, the Lord will descend from heaven with a shout. He's going to perform a military command. He's basically going to tell everyone in heaven that now is the time we are going. The rapture is now. And it says, with the voice of the archangel. Well, then the archangel is the one that is going to then perform the shout to all the armies that are in heaven. And then they're all going to be getting ready to go. And it says, with the trumpet of God. Salpinx is the Greek word for trumpet. The Hebrew equivalent words here are teruah and shofar. And so this is the reason why we believe this trumpet blast is actually a shofar blast. And that the shofar is going to be blown at the rapture. And who's going to rise first? Well, it says the dead in Messiah, they rise first. Now, here's the issue, though. Why do they rise first? And remember, the dead in Messiah are coming back with Yeshua, aren't they? And so isn't that a problem? It says the dead in Messiah are going to rise first, meaning those who are in the ground, I would imagine, right, are going to be rising first. But they're actually coming back with Yeshua from heaven. So what's going on here? Well, let me tell you what I believe. I believe, you see, the dead that are in Messiah rising first are the bodies of those who have died. You see, Shaul tells us that when we are absent from the body, we are present with the Lord. So our bodies go in the ground, and then our spirit and our soul go where? To heaven. Yeah. So the spirit and the soul of the believers that are in heaven are coming back with Yeshua in the rapture. And guess what he's going to be doing? He's raising up the dead bodies, the bones, the dust, right? Putting the bodies and the spirit and soul back together again. It's quite the miracle. It's quite the miracle. He did that with Lazarus. When he raised Lazarus, Lazarus had a dead body. There was no dust, but he was already degrading there, right? But God, Yeshua, put his spirit and soul that was already in heaven and brought it back to earth and put it in his body. And so that's what we see here, I believe. And this is why the dead in Messiah rise first, because they have to be brought back into their soul and their spirit first. Those who are alive, like in verse 17, well, we're not separated. If we're alive at the rapture, we're not separated from our spirit. All we have to do is a transformation. But let's take a look at verse 17. Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and thus we shall always be with the Lord. So those who are alive at the time of the rapture, or the word here is caught up. The Greek word is harpazo, and it means a snatching away. And so those of us that are alive at the time were snatched away in a second, less than a second, together with those who had died in Messiah first, and we meet them in the clouds, and the Lord's in the clouds as well. And so we meet the Lord there in the air, and that word for meet actually means for a meeting. So it's like meeting a king outside the city. So we're having a meeting with the Lord in the air, and then thus we shall always be with the Lord. Wherever the Lord goes, we shall go with him. Presumably, the belief is that he's going back to heaven at this time, because in John chapter 14, first 3 verses talk about the rapture as well. But it talks about him creating dwelling places in heaven for us. And I believe we're going to be in those dwelling places after the rapture. And there's a whole lot of other reasons that we cover as well, but we're not going to be talking about those. But we are going to be going now to 1 Corinthians chapter